Does anyone watching here know what rain is? It is the most obvious effect of the water cycle, and has gained considerable notoriety as illustrated in the nursery rhyme Rain, Rain, Go Away. People hate rain for many reasons. For many kids, it means being trapped inside all day. For adults, it means driving in the rain to work with an increased chance of wrecking. For people who are exercising or just starting to exercise, that means that their workout's canceled today. Darn, I guess I can't exercise. I'll just have to go home and sit all day, or go to work and sit in an office all day, or go to school and sit all day. So different. With modern advancements, there are very few things you can't do when there is rain that you could do without rain. We have indoor fitness centers for exercise. We have cars to take us long distances in the rain. We've had buildings for who knows how long. We've had umbrellas for just a little while shorter than that. Rain is more of a minor inconvenience than anything to be super worried about. Unless you're the mother of a teen who is driving in the rain for the first time, or the last time as far as you know. But besides that, very few are deathly afraid of rain. But for many people, rain could mean the difference between life and death. Now, flooding is a naturally occurring disaster, but its occurrence is increased significantly by climate change. Flooding has the potential to affect everyone, but it is particularly harmful to one group of people, the impoverished. Flooding is also not the only natural disaster increased by climate change that affects the impoverished. Because of climate change, the impoverished are daily threatened by famine, health, and flooding. Climate change is being actively sped up by corporations who have abused the impoverished through production of cash crops and deforestation and outsourcing of pollutive industries. The impoverished are actually the majority of the world's population, representing 80% of people living in the world today who live on $10 a day or less. 880 million people live on $1 a day or less of that 80% of the world's population. The world's richest are 20% of the world's population, account for 76.6% of total consumption, compared to 23.4% for 80% of the world's population. So when I say corporations are abusing the poor, keep in mind two things. One, corporations include you and me because we are buying what they are selling. And secondly, this is an apartheid of class rather than race. This is a minority exploiting the majority. This separation manifests itself in a very strange way, environmentally. Typically it results in violence or oppression, but today, ladies and gentlemen, discrimination has caused the whole earth to come and swallow up its victims. Climate change as a world issue is the reality that the world's temperature has risen 1 degree over the past century due to man-related causes. And those causes will continue to rise over the next century, with the Earth possibly rising 8 further degrees. This causes considerable problems for the poor, who have very little separating themselves from the environment that is becoming incredibly hostile towards them. Obviously, with the environment gradually warming, there's considerable negative impact on agriculture. Agriculture is one of the central economic sectors for the impoverished, but climate change threatens their whole system. Currently, it's predicted that a further 900 million people will become impoverished regardless of climate change. Now, this is part of the poverty scenario, which is a very pessimistic prediction, but a likely one. With climate change, a further 126 million people will become impoverished due to climate change driving up the prices of food. It's as simple as that. For many of us, we go to a store and see our favorite candy bars an inch shorter and feel the entire food industry is out to get us. That may be, but they have not screwed us over nearly as much as the entire population of impoverished people in the world. 126 million people, in addition to the inevitable 900 million people, will become impoverished because 1 degree does make a difference. The amount of people that become severely impoverished by the year 2030 is almost 3 times the exact equivalency of the entire U.S. population. Imagine if tomorrow you woke up and found all you had to pay for food bills, everything, is $1. Now imagine a billion other people in that exact same scenario with you. This poverty rate is especially harmful for the poor, who sometimes pay 60% of their total income on food that is slowly becoming more expensive due to climate change. This is in comparison to 10% of total income spent on food for the wealthiest, us. The major problem with this rise in food prices is that it is due to a decrease in crop yield often produced by the impoverished. This means their major source of income decreases while the product's price increases. And the more one goes in one direction, the more the other goes in the complete opposite direction. There seems to be an obvious answer to this predicament. Why not let them eat the food they produce? Let them become self-sustaining. There's one small problem with that. The aforementioned corporations. The big man is putting down the little man once again, only this time the little man represents a sizable chunk of the population while the big man is a couple of guys in tight suits. Corporations are forcing and producing cash crops for consumption by the rich, taking away of production of nutritious crops for consumption by the poor. Institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have done a lot in the fight to end global poverty. But they often place a lot of focus on third world countries paying back their excessive debts. When a giant corporation that you are dependent on comes knocking at whatever you call a door, it is generally in your best interest to deliver before you become self-sustainable. What recent history has shown is that the poor turn to producing cash crops, cotton, sizzle, tea, tobacco, sugarcane, and cocoa in order to pay off these debts. What is even worse is that the poor often grow these crops on land that the rich cleared large numbers of trees from, preventing the trees from taking up excess carbon dioxide, a major greenhouse gas responsible for global warming. Taking up this excess carbon dioxide, which is caused by burning fossil fuels and breathing, and this also causes an increase in flooding. Those areas are also used to raise cattle, which the poor cannot afford to eat as there is not enough energy in these organisms due to the energy loss at each trophic level, from the sun to producers to cows, with each transfer of energy causing 90% loss. The poor cannot afford to eat this food in every sense of the word. But the rich can, so the meat is sent off to the highest bidder and sold at fast food restaurants, where energy does not matter, but money does. This is agriculture's industry rather than a need-based supply. Worse still is that what little grain is grown is often fed to the cows rather than the people, because the cows are going to turn a greater profit for the rich than the people. While all this is going on, the rich are practicing a policy put forth by Lawrence Summers, who was the chief economist of the World Bank, then later U.S. Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. I'm going to read a leaked memo from Summers written at the time he was working for the World Bank, called Let Them Eat Pollution. Just between you and me, shouldn't the World Bank be encouraging more migration of dirty industries to the less developed countries? The economic logic behind dumping a load of toxic waste in the lowest wage country is impeccable. And we should face up to that. Underpopulated countries in Africa are vastly underpolluted. Their air quality is probably vastly inefficiently low compared to Los Angeles or Mexico City. The concern over an agent that causes a 1 in a million change in the odds of prostate cancer is obviously going to be much higher in a country where people who survive to get prostate cancer than a country where under 5 mortality is 200 per thousand. These are supposed good guys, by the way. Obviously, putting out all this pollution is going to have a very negative impact on the local environment. But there is another equally harmful action occurring simultaneous to this: deforestation. Deforestation increases flooding and other natural disasters, which greatly impacts the poor, who are often unprotected by their local governments. A little science on deforestation for those of you who aren't aware of this dangerous act. Deforestation is the act of cutting down trees, typically at a very high rate, with the current rate leading down a path where the world does not have tropical rainforest in 100 years. This destroys the habitats of many species who live there and causes the soil to dry up as the tree's canopy and roots help keep the ground moist. Removing them turns tropical rainforests into deserts. It also causes an increase in floods, which is the main problem when it comes to the impoverished. The trees used to take water in the roots and set it back into the air through transpiration, but now the water is just going to build up, eventually causing numerous floods, especially in countries like India, Kenya, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and Thailand. Unfortunately, it is not very easy to provide safeguards for those that be affected by floods, as their governments are strapped for funds to protect their citizens as they're forced to pay off debts to the very organizations that are intended to protect them, cutting back from providing health care, amongst other things, so our citizens won't die just to have them be homeless, injured, or dead from a flood. In the event that someone becomes injured in a flood or sick from malnutrition, keep in mind that the poor pay for half of their health care out of pocket. This compares people in richer countries who pay less than a quarter out of pocket. People who live on $1 or sometimes less a day pay for their health bill half out of pocket. That's 50 cents. 50 cents to cover an injury from a flood, an act of God. Keep in mind that the other half of their income is spent on food which is becoming increasingly more expensive due to climate change. Food which may soon become too expensive if healthcare remains the same. $1 can only stretch but so far, and as we continue to hold them under the weight of debt, as we continue to let greed determine our actions over common human decency, accelerating climate change in the process, as we continue to stand by while floods come and wash away whole neighborhoods and areas where their cries may never be heard, things will only get worse before or if they ever get better, which is a scenario that becomes less likely every day. Earlier I mentioned a prediction that over 1 billion people will become impoverished, with a third of those people finding themselves in that situation because of climate change. The prosperity scenario, this is the optimistic version mind you, predicts that only 142 million people go into poverty, with an additional 16 million becoming impoverished due to climate change. This is what we are shooting for. We are not trying to have people prosper and grow, we're trying to have as few people go into poverty as possible. That would be like a hostage negotiator right out of the gate saying, we're not going to try to save everyone. Well, we're just going to make sure only a few million people die rather than 1 billion. That is more than California, Texas, Florida, and New York combined. That's the optimistic view. Corporations and ourselves live in a very different world. A world where poverty does not exist. A world where wealth and prosperity is not just the norm but the requirements. Americans feel that money is their right, whereas the impoverished barely have the privilege of their own lungs. We live in a world where rain is just an annoyance to our daily lives, and a minor one at that. Not one where it means that we may never eat again and for the rest of our lives because the 50 cents spent on food just does not cover it anymore. Not that it ever did.